4 rounds of fixtures. 3 managers sacked and 1 walks. 6 new ones appointed. 135 games. 347 goals. 4 teams took maximum points. 6 teams took none at all. And, George Ellick, how do you get a big yellow boat out of a relegation battle?
How do you get a big yellow boat out of a relegation battle?
You row it. Row it. Get it? Welcome.
Row the boat.
Welcome to NTT20's Festive Recap. 4 rounds of fixtures. The ones that started on Boxing Day and ended last Saturday are going to be covered in this mega pod. We're taking a look at the major winners and losers. This isn't going to be match analysis of all 135 games. Major winners and losers discussed. 3 or 4 in each league. Some sneaky winners and sneaky losers as well, just below the top line stuff. So plenty to cover. This week we're going to set the scene as the EFL turns for home in 2025. And next week we're going to blow the scene to smithereens with our mid-season predictions podcast, as is traditional after FA Cup third round weekend. We'll start in the Championship. 12 teams dropped places in the table since we last did a Monday pod. The most, Luton Town, down 5 as we record, but they do play at QPR after we record on Monday night. Millwall fell 3 places. 9 teams rose. Oxford up 6. Preston and Bristol City up 4. And 3 teams are in the same spot as where they started. Sunderland, Stoke, and right at the bottom, Plymouth Argyle. But within that, so much has happened, so much narrative, so much action. George, who's our first major winner of the Championship festive period?
Yellows. Has to be. Yeah, I mean, it is Oxford, and I am going to spend the next hour and a half talking about it, if that's okay with you. It's interesting because when you've got a team like Oxford, who after a decent start to the season may have flirted with the idea that anything more than survival could have been possible, but by the time the decision was made to sack Des Buckingham, I think it was fairly obvious that survival was the one and only aim. That decision was made in order to maximise the probability of that coming about. 10 points is so many points. To pick up 10 points in 1 week is just under a quarter of what you need for the whole season. If we're going to say that 45 is kind of what you're aiming for in order to try and solidify safety, maybe a bit more just to be safe. So to pick up 10 points in 4 games is, firstly, it's a massive turnaround from where they were. 1 win in 16 prior to that, and that win was a home against Hull, where I wouldn't say Oxford were necessarily deserving of that 3 points on the day. The fixture list obviously played a helpful part within this, with 2 home games against Cardiff and against Plymouth Argyle, teams struggling down towards the bottom end of the table. And then, away trips to Millwall and Preston are more difficult, but you're still playing 4 teams who aren't necessarily teams we anticipate will be challenging even for the playoffs this season. But it's still an unbelievable turnaround. And for Gary Rowett to come in, who is very, very different in profile to Des Buckingham, very, very different in terms of the esteem that he's held in within Oxford fans, where the fan base, for the most part, were angry and disappointed that Buckingham was sacked. But the decision looks totally justified now. And when you consider what Gary Rowett has done in his career thus far, when you think of the job that he did at Birmingham, taking over a side who were threatened with relegation out of the Championship, at Millwall, a side with a small budget who were threatened with relegation out of the Championship, and took them to the brink of the playoffs on multiple occasions. In the cold light of day, it's pretty obvious that this was, if you can make this kind of appointment, it's one that's going to improve your chance of staying up. As clinical as it may have been, and as little thought given to the emotional side of things, and the performances have been way better in a very short period of time. It must be a strange time to come in as a manager into a club over Christmas when you don't really have much time to work with the players and the games come so quickly. But a change of shape has worked, with Rowett switching from a 4-3-3 to a 4-2-3-1, albeit one that's got some kind of funky tactical quirks, with Goodrum off the left kind of coming inside and creating a box midfield, with the left back position being kind of the flyer with Greg Lee, and right back more defensive minded. Individual players, Shemi Plaheta has gone from being a player that I think most Oxford fans assumed we would be trying to cancel his contract in January, to now being, when he wasn't in the team and was rested on Saturday, there was kind of a meltdown within the fan base given his performances over the Christmas period. Mark Harris looking way sharper up front until he hurt his groin, or or the back of his leg, and had to come off on Saturday. Volt's looking good. Ruben Rodriguez being really well suited to a change of position for him, kind of being moved back into that role he played for Notts County, almost as a second striker behind Harris, scoring 2 in the 2 away games. A 1-0 win at Millwall from a really well-worked goal. It's all been very positive, and even the 1-1 draw with Preston on Saturday, where Oxford went ahead against the run of play thanks to a Freddie Woodman error. And it was a bit of an onslaught before that and after that from North End, who got their goal through Will Keane. But just a battling display, and one that showed a lot of steel and a lot of grit and determination from Oxford that was lacking in games such as the 2-0 defeat at QPR just before Buckingham was sacked. So, for Rowett, it can't really have started better. As loved as Buckingham will always be at Oxford for what he delivered last season, Rowett is now absolutely not the man that stepped into his shoes. He's already being held up as someone who may just have saved our season. And I've gone myself as being pretty resigned to relegation and okay with that, to now thinking that I'd be almost surprised if we were to go down from here.
Well, still third favourites with the bookies behind Argyle and Portsmouth, but clearly having made things look a lot rosier at the moment. Yellows. Another major winner in the top half is Bristol City. Now, Bristol City picked up 10 points over these 4 games, and it could, dare I say it, should have been 12. An injury time concession away at Argyle, bit of a scrappy set-piece goal, a ricochet went against them, Pleguezuelo finishing off and breaking Bristol City hearts. But overall, what a time it's been for those fans, up 4 places from the start of Boxing Day. They were 8 points off the top 6. It felt like Bristol City were going to be doing their normal missing out of the playoff places by a semi-significant margin, while wishing to be within them, or at least a little closer to them. And they're now 3 points off it. And we're going to talk about some of the teams also gunning for the playoffs who didn't have such a good time. There's now momentum and belief, no doubt about that. 3 wins at home, and, fixture lists, schedules are always going to play a part in a pod like this, where we're zooming in on a small chunk of matches. And it's fair to say Bristol City had a kind schedule. They had home games against Derby, Portsmouth, Luton, all teams in the bottom 10 of the division, and then that game at Argyle, bottom of it. But they won all 3 of those home games to 0, deservedly in all of them, I would say. There's been a change of shape, which is notable. Liam Manning been trying to put forward a 4-2-3-1 type since the season started, after signing a couple of wingers in the summer like Hirakawa, but now it's back to 3 centre-backs, it's wing-backs, it's a box midfield, which I must say is looking really good at the moment. It's not really a box, is it? I'll try and describe it. You've got Jason Knight and Max Bird, the old Derby duo, at the base of it, and both of them, Knight is just exceptional in so many different facets, and Bird is really growing into his time at Bristol City and is particularly threading quite nice through balls at the moment. Scott Twine is doing the same. He's really stepped up in the last couple of weeks. Twine with assists, great set pieces, plenty of through balls, scored a spanking goal as well against Luton to win that game from outside the box. No doubt we might see a few more of those in the next few months. And Anis Mehmeti is just he's just become a bit of a star for this team and become one of the standout players in his position, I would say, outside of kind of the parachute payment clubs who are filled with superstars who shouldn't really be at this level. He's really developing nicely, Mehmeti. That selfish streak, which is X factor, it is individual skill, but it can also be frustrating when he's shooting at the wrong time, snatching at chances, not playing with his head up. I feel like he's improved a lot on that side of his game, and also in his execution in those last moments. He's a real goal threat at the moment, and so it's just quite a nice balance. You've got Bird and Twine, who are both really comfortable in tight areas and playing through balls. You've got the legs of Knight, the pressing. You've got Mehmeti with the X factor. It's just at the top of the pitch with Wells and Mayulu and Armstrong, where they haven't quite nailed it just yet, but looking strong at the back as well with McNally and Dickey both scoring goals from set pieces recently. It's just been great, and look, the generous schedule is a big factor here. There's no doubt about that, and I like the change in shape. I think it looks okay. With Pring's injury, they've got a bit of an awkwardness at wing-back, where I don't think they're as strong there as they are in the centre of the park, for example. But it's a good spine. I want to see more of this from Bristol City. At the same time, they're a massive winner of this period, and they were excellent. I banged on for quite a few years, I think, about always being pretty impressed with them up against the bigger sides in the division. Great out of possession, but when the onus is on them to break teams down in home games where they're expected to win, sometimes it's looked a bit like pulling teeth. But they've literally done that here 3 times, winning to 0. And they've got to see this as a playoff spot up for grabs, with West Brom losing Corberan, with Watford and Blackburn slowing down a little bit. There's absolutely one playoff spot up for grabs, and Bristol City putting themselves in a good position here. Now we're going near the top for the next big winner of the festive period.
Burnley, I think we have to see as being big winners, both for their own performances and results, but also because of what's gone on around them. They've gone to Blackburn, their big rivals, they've beaten them 1-0. It was in no way a convincing performance. I watched it for the most part. They had a decent spell of kind of territory early in the second half, which yielded the goal from Zian Fleming, a really well taken diving header. But I thought Blackburn were the better team, or the team in ascendancy for the most part within the game. The corner count of 10-0 tells its own story as to the pressure and where it came. But in these games, when there's a big rivalry at stake and Blackburn in the kind of good form that they're in, I think Burnley going away to Blackburn right now and getting a win, regardless of the way the game went, is overwhelmingly positive and continues their excellent run against their rivals. And Blackburn Rovers might be a rival in terms of the history of the clubs, but a promotion rival is Sheffield United. And right now, it's very hard not to see Sheffield United and Burnley as the 2 biggest threats to Leeds winning the title. And they went to Sheffield United. Blades don't lose very often at Bramall Lane. They don't concede very often at Bramall Lane. And they won 2-0. In terms of significance, you can only really look at an away win at Leeds as being more significant, I would say, than those 2 away wins. And they've already done that this season, where they went to Leeds and they won the game 1-0. So for them to have put this together at this time is impressive, aided by, as I'm sure we'll talk about in a second, Sheffield United and Leeds themselves not having the best, not being featured in this major winners at least, and not conceding a goal. So continuing their incredible defensive record by again going 4 games without conceding. So it wasn't, as is always the case for Burnley, we're not talking here about liquid football, we're not talking about incredible individual performances, we're just talking about a team who don't concede any goals, who managed to get their way clear in fine margin games. And here, at a time where teams above them have dropped points, they've made some ground.
Yeah, Zian Fleming with that nice diving header against Blackburn. I can't remember if it was Sam or Hugh on the NTT20.com group chat pointing out that they had only just noticed, as I had, that his name is Ian Fleming with a Z on the front, the writer of James Bond. And I had quite a good time thinking of James Bond titles just with a random Z in them. So that's why I'm going to say, and then move on, the man with the golden gun. Yeah, all those clean sheets are just ridiculous, aren't they? They're on course, having conceded 9 goals in 26 games, is it? They're on course to have a better defensive record in terms of goals conceded per game than Chelsea did in their record-setting defensive campaign. I think it was 04-05, where that's the sort of record that you look at now, and in Premier League context, you think that there's just absolutely no way that will ever be broken, could ever be broken, and yet here we are, in a division that is in some ways more competitive in terms of the talent advantage that Chelsea had over the rest of that division. I suppose you could argue that Burnley have a similar talent advantage, certainly budgetary and squad advantage, but even so, like, the competitiveness of this league, as we say every single week, the fact that they are keeping clean sheets for fun is incredible, but it's still, as you said, not great going forward, and that's not bitter. They drew a blank at Borough and against Stoke. They have failed to score in over a third of their matches. But given the fact of who they beat, Sheffield United and Blackburn, and sharing the spoils away at Borough, which is a great result, they have to be the big winners towards the top. I mean, you mentioned Leeds there. I've got them as a sneaky winner because they also got 8 points. They got the same amount of points as Burnley. They weren't top of the league, and now they are top of the league. So there's a couple of very easy ways where you could say Leeds are major winners of this period. But the last 2 games, they've conceded late equalisers because they just refuse to live an easy life, do they? They'd won at Stoke, they'd won at Derby, away form questions being put to bed somewhat with good displays and some nice goals scored. And then the last 2 games where they just keep shooting themselves in the foot. Meslier is still a massive conversation because he's just consistently causing
the
them
reaction
harm
of the players
defensively. You've got Carlisle on the bench. Can we just have 5 games of Carlisle? See what happens.
I've never really seen a collective show of emotion like that. I mean, you can basically see Joe Rodon saying to him, like, "What are you doing?" To be clear, this is the goal that they conceded, the second Hull goal in the 3-3 draw, where it looks like the ball is going over the bar, and it looks like Meslier could either leave it and let it go over the bar, or just to be safe, just power it over the top and get the corner. And instead, he tries to catch it, Jordan Pickford style. His wrists kind of clatter off the crossbar, and he drops it straight down, and Hull score the goal. And I would also say that he was at fault for the equaliser from Abu Kamara, where he comes out, flaps, gets absolutely nowhere near the cross, and when the shot comes in from Kamara from range, Mellier's out of position, is trying to get back in position, and the ball kind of goes into an area where you'd think if he just stayed put, he'd have had a good sight of the ball and would have been able to save it. He's a massive issue for them, and I think when you see a show of emotion like that from his teammates, where you look at, for example, at the Ugbo penalty for Sheffield Wednesday, where it's an awful penalty if someone completely void of confidence, but you see Valerie and you see Bannon, you see all of them go straight over to him and kind of lift him up and get him going again. I think when you see teammates of a player express that kind of frustration, it's probably quite hard to see a way back. It wouldn't surprise me at all if we do see Darlow fairly soon.
And, it's even starker in comparison with the shot-stopping numbers being put up by James Trafford in goal for Burnley, Michael Cooper in goal for Sheffield United, and Patterson in goal for Sunderland, who've all been massive net positives. Net positive, that's quite a good pun for a goalkeeper. Anyway,
yeah, I think basically
Trafford,
without Meslier, they'd have had the title sewn up by now, basically. And that's that's even like a numbers point as well. Like, put Trafford in goal, replicate the shot stopping stats, and they probably have about 9 more points.
Yeah, Trafford's conceded 3 goals in 13 with 34 shots on target faced, 31 of them saved, only the 3 conceded.
He was so bored on Saturday that Trafford decided to start saving shots that were going miles wide.
We've got quite a fun couple of weeks ahead at the top of the division, with Burnley's next game against Sunderland, and then they play Argyle, and then they play Leeds United. So the top of the champ, where, what do we got? 4 teams separated by 3 points. It's the dream for us at this stage of the season. 4 teams, 2 automatic promotion spots, 3 points separating them, and some massive fixtures over the next couple of weeks. Let's have a couple more sneaky winners. I had Leeds on my list there. I've also got Norwich on my list. They picked up 10 points from these 4 games and significantly cut the gap to the playoffs. I thought they were kind of waving goodbye to the playoffs and just going pure season of transition under new manager, new sporting director, loads of new young players, etc. Now they're only 4 points off, and you just start to wonder. Clearly it's still on if they can keep it up. And impressive in the context of Sargent still being out and them not having an obvious number 9 to take his spot. Sanats has been game up top without scoring a ton of goals. Borja Sainz's goals have dried up completely in this period as well, but they're still making it work. Marcelino Nunez stepped up in particular in the centre of the park, and I did see he's been linked with... Who was he linked with? He linked with someone important in world football for quite a lot of money. Elsewhere, you've got Marcondes as well, who's been a really sneaky good addition for them, and is offering them Everton. Did I say a big player in the world of football?
Yeah, a very important team in world football. Who can disagree?
An historic Premier League club, but for how much longer? Marconde's been pretty good. Again, I'll bring up the schedule. They did have 3 home games out of 4, which is kind. They did have to score 2 in injury time to come back to beat Coventry on Saturday with Forson at the double. But just more reasons to believe in Torup, even if it doesn't lead to a top 6 finish. I really like him. I like the fact that the Norwich fans seem to really like him and be buying into what he's doing, even if the nature of the team at the moment is pretty high ceiling, low floory. But they're clinging on to the good times that they've had, and I like that. It's definitely a positive chapter, I think, in the Norwich story, even if some might look from the outside and see it as, hold on, you made the playoffs last season, what are you doing 4 points outside? I'm not necessarily sure. Well, I think I'm quite sympathetic to allowing them this time, because I can see the vision of where they might go, and I think it is exciting. Run me through a couple of your sneaky winners.
So I've got Preston, who, when you look back at where they started, on the 25th of December, on Christmas Day, they were in 18th on 23 points and just 5 points clear of the relegation zone. They're now gone up 4 places up to 14th and a 7 points clear, and you think kind of playing their way out of it. Really impressive home wins against Wednesday and Hull. Probably deserve to have 3 home wins out of 3 in the 1-1 draw against Oxford. And just continuing to improve under Hecky. So just one of those teams kind of quietly going about their business, but in my mind, a very obvious upward trend that continued over Christmas. And then Hull, who might be quite a surprising one to see on this list, given they started the Christmas period outside the relegation zone and are currently inside the relegation zone in 21st position. But this is one of those where it's kind of looking a little bit beyond just the bare results and seeing a pretty big improvement across the board under their new manager Ruben Sellers. 2 pretty impressive results, one of which was the 1-0 win at Blackburn. Blackburn not an easy team to beat, and they were able to get themselves in front there. And then, of course, coming back from 3-1 down against Leeds on Saturday in really impressive fashion. And then, crucially, 2 players young players who have been brought to the club with pretty big reputations and had really struggled to make an impact so far. One of them is Abu Kamara, who had quite a weird week after putting some emojis under a Pompey Instagram post that understandably rattled quite a lot of Hull fans, given that they are competing with Portsmouth to try and stay in the division, and making a pretty big mistake against Middlesbrough. But he rectified that with, the first goal, the finish is sensational from Kamara, a really nice lob over Meslier. But credit has to go to the second player I want to talk about in Mason Burstow, who, playing off the left-hand side, is looking really good for Hull. He's kind of a player that massive reputation at Charlton, goes to Chelsea, has a really poor loan at Sunderland where he really kind of basically doesn't impact anything. And I'd kind of decided, without seeing enough of him, that he probably wasn't actually very good. And this was a case of a player making a name for himself early on and actually not really developing in the necessary way. But that ball for Kamara's opening goal is full of quality, and he's playing out of position on the left-hand side but looking really, really dangerous in it. And this is what Ruben Sellers did at Reading. This is what they've hired him to do. At Reading, Sellers has taken the careers of young players and set them on pretty incredible trajectories in difficult circumstances that probably wasn't necessarily expected. And even in a short period of time, I think we're seeing him starting to get his grip on these players. So, yeah, they may have dropped into the relegation zone, but loads of green shoots, I would say, at Hull, and some signs that they are improving under Sellers. And I definitely have it as a pretty positive week or so for them, despite the drop in table.
Yeah, Blake.
Wow.
Matt Crooks, bit of a strange one that, but look, fair play.
I don't hate it.
Get him running from deep into the box, attacking cutbacks. That's what we like to see. I've got another sneaky winner, and it's Stoke City. Now, the results weren't particularly impressive, but Mark Robins is their manager now, and if you've listened to this pod at all over the last 8.5 years, you'll know that we think that Mark Robins did possibly the best job over a long period of time of any manager in the EFL over that time period, with Coventry City taking them as he did from League Two to things like the Championship playoff final, things like a semi-final of the FA Cup at Wembley, etc., selling players for lots and lots and lots of money. And he's now the Stoke City manager, and it's pretty fascinating, isn't it? Stoke and their recent managerial history is a fascinating footballing topic anyway, one that has had us tearing our hair out at times. But this is fascinating because you've got this guy who we think is and has been really good, joining a club that's now basically known as like a graveyard for good managers. The list is growing of good managers, or in the case of Narcis Pelak, very talented coaches at the very least, who've gone there and been swallowed up and spat out. Then there's the fact that Adi Viviash is not going with him. So the narrative that came out after his departure at Coventry, that Viviash was kind of the one that did a lot of the training and the coaching and the development, and that Robins without him was a lesser manager, less impactful manager. Well, we might start to find out. He has brought in James Rowberry, who used to be the Newport County manager. He is known in coaching and development circles as an elite coach as well. So perhaps he can bring what is lacking with no Adi Viviash. But it's a really, really interesting appointment. It's got to be seen as a massive positive for Stoke City. Let's not overthink this. Robins is, with or without Viviash, someone with a lot of cachet at this level, someone who I'm sure will give the whole club, including players and fans, a bit of a boost just to have him in their dugout. And also, from a footballing point of view, he is, to my eyes, one of the kind of ultimate pragmatists at the moment, and in the most positive sense. That's not to say a boring manager. I mean pragmatic in its literal sense. He finds a way to turn the players that he has at his disposal into basically the best football team that they can be in whatever formation, be it 3 at the back or 4-2-3-1, and broadly whatever style as well, whether it be quick and direct or ponderous and build-uppy. So because of that, I'm having been pretty concerned about a Stoke relegation under Pelak. I now find it hard to imagine that they would be so disastrous under Robbins as to be threatened by relegation. But of course, they have to actually do the work. They have to actually get the results. And a 0-0 draw at home to Argyle wasn't a fantastic result over the weekend. But clean sheets in their last couple of games, that's what they needed after Palak's era was basically defined by Victor Johansson making about 23 saves a game. Major losers, I'm afraid.
You.
Oh, come off it.
No, you're a sneaky loser. No one knows.
Who are you going with first?
I'll kick off with Luton, I think. And this could obviously age pretty badly, given they play tonight. They have an away game. They tend to lose their away games quite heavily. I think they've conceded 25 goals in the last 9 away games, all of which have been defeats, which is pretty alarming. They lost all 3 games of the Christmas period. They only scored 1 goal. That was from Carlton Morris, thanks to a goalkeeping error by Vigouroux against Swansea. In the game, they ended up losing 2-1. And it feels like this has been a period of time for Luton where not only has relegation gone from being something that, like, yeah, you know, it probably won't happen, they'll probably be good enough, to now being like, right, okay, they're absolutely in a relegation battle. And I think anyone who doesn't think that now is delusional, because right now their performances are as bad as anyone else in the league, really. So that has become it's become a reality, and it's not helped by the fact that teams like Oxford and Preston are starting to pick up points and are making that relegation battle a bit more open. Albeit Preston not really involved in the before Christmas anyway, but certainly were 6 weeks or so ago. And then Rob Edwards, where there's been a vocal section of Luton's fan base that have wanted him to be gone for quite a long time, and you can understand why. There's been another part of the fan base that have wanted to retain the faith in him, and again, you can understand why, given what's happened at the club. But it feels to me like over the last week or so, the tide has kind of turned against him even further. And I worry that if they're well beaten tonight by a QPR team who've won 4 in a row at home, then things could get really nasty for Edwards. And it's getting to the stage now where it feels like everyone needs putting out of their misery, to be honest, because Edwards cuts a really emotional and distraught figure in his interviews. Fans are pretty concerned as to the direction the club is going, and there's no real evidence on the pitch to suggest that things are going to change anytime soon. A few weeks ago I was saying that Luton are back. If they were back for any period of time, they're certainly not anymore. It's desperate, and it's a huge game tonight, and it's a game where, you know, if they can somehow manage to find their mojo and get a win, maybe they'll kickstart something. But I fear that if it goes the other way, in the way I expect it probably will go, then that could be curtains for this era at the club.
I must admit, it doesn't feel like a huge chunk of teams that have just had a shambolic few weeks. So I'm trying to dampen the phrase major losers here. But the team that have a player called Imran Loser, Watford, they are someone I'd like to talk about in this sense, because they won at home to Pompey on Boxing Day. 90th minute winner it took, equaliser from the penalty spot. And then they've lost their next 3 games. At home to Cardiff, away to QPR 3-1, and then 2-1 at home to Sheffield United. And for them, the biggest issue is losing 2 home games where they had been previously literally unbeatable this season at home. And I think for a team whose really strong start to the season and their kind of playoff level of points was, A, completely based on their home form, and B, was not based on any sort of solid foundations of strong, repeatable, consistent performances, a good defensive foundation, and a coherent, consistent attack. They are an exciting attacking team, and they have been very good going forward at times this season. They have almost never been good defensively this season, and I just worry that losing that cloak of invincibility at home is going to have a bit of an issue for them. If they do start drifting down the table, it'll be one of those situations where their strong start will work against Cleverley, even though he was getting a lot of credit for that, and people will start questioning him, no doubt, if they start sliding down the table, kind of, a victim of his own success in a sense, if that does happen. But overall, this was just a strong chance for them with 3 home games to solidify their playoff credentials, and they did not do that. They are, if you look at them compared to the other top 10 teams, they're so notably poor defensively, and it doesn't seem to be getting that much better. And yeah, just a little slide down the table for Watford and some disappointing displays. I wanted to mention Sheffield United here. Again, major loser doesn't sound right. They have literally just won at Vicarage Road.
Sounds like you don't have to say major laser.
Have you heard that awesome Sheffield United, it wasn't just that before the win against Watford they hadn't won in the Christmas period. It was the fact that they'd lost to Burnley at home. First goals they'd conceded at home since their first home game, first time they'd lost. Then they lost at Sunderland as well. So losing to 2 direct automatic promotion rivals, then drawing at home to Sheffield United. It wasn't a great period for them. Loads of absences, the squad being stretched, and they end it with this battling win at Watford, where Chris Wilder is kind of in tears post-match in his interview, which is pretty amazing. He's just so proud of as he sees it, the hurdles or the obstacles put in front of his team, particularly physically with what is a thin squad. The fact that some of them are playing through the pain barrier and then some. Tom Davis in particular got a shout out. And it was one of those interviews where, because it's Wilder and because he's made a bit of a habit of these, headline box office interviews that, certainly off the top of my head, generally lead to really strong runs of form and success. I'm thinking about Northampton. I think you told us about once he did it at Oxford. He certainly's done it
out of this poxy league.
Exactly, he's certainly done it at Blaze before. There's a part of me that's like, that's an iconic Wilder interview that will bring everyone together even more so. But it's also a sign of strain for the manager and by extension the team that, as he's talking about. So the beauty of football is I don't really know which way this is going to go, but we are certainly going to find out in the next few weeks. They're still a loser for me just because of the fact that the 3 teams they're vying for automatic promotion for got 8 points and 7 points, and they only got 4. Who else?
Plymouth Argyle. Some people may say they're the biggest winners of the Christmas period, given that Wayne Rooney is no longer their manager, but I'm not entirely sure that it's that simple. They had 3 away games over the course of the Christmas periods. As I've said on many occasions, I can't remember any team ever being as bad as the rest of their opposition as Argyle are away from home. We saw a decent performance at home to Bristol City, to be fair, in the 2-2 draw, but that's nothing new at home park. And I was really interested to see how they would get on away at Stoke. A Stoke team that, yes, they made a change of manager, but themselves have been pretty porous defensively and have given away a lot of shots. Argyle mustered 2 in the 0-0 draw away at Stoke, both from range, which early signs, but it means that just sacking Wayne Rooney isn't necessarily enough to get you improving. I think whoever takes over, whether it's Steven Schumacher or someone else, is going to have an incredibly hard job to turn around Argyle's away form and make them competitive and keep them up this season. Even though I accept that Rooney wasn't doing a particularly good job and probably wasn't deserving of the job in the first place, it's not just him being bad. It's the case that they are a team with a relatively small budget for the league who just about stayed up last season, who have got worse again, and certainly an individual in Morgan Whittaker, who is so integral to their promotion until he was recalled from his loan, but in the first half of the season, and then so integral to their survival last season. When he's completely lost form, it's not a massive surprise that their points tally has suffered for it. So, yeah, I mean, the back-to-back draws might represent some improvement after Rooney's gone, but you have to judge this as to Argyle's potential to stay up, and it was done absolutely no help over the course of the Christmas period. If anything, it's dwindled even further.
I find it so difficult to imagine that they won't improve away from home ever so slightly or more, and that they won't improve defensively and out of possession ever so slightly or hopefully more. And so I do think that they're getting rid of Wayne Rooney makes their survival chances much more likely. Obviously, we don't know.
Hard to say without knowing who comes in.
Sure. But, I mean, if you named 100 people, 100 professional football managers right now, I'm pretty sure I'd be confident in about 95 of them to do what.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. That isn't, this isn't me defending Rooney necessarily. It's just quite a lot of the conversation around Argyle seems to be, well, they're rubbish because Wayne Rooney's there, whereas actually it's not a massive drop off from where they were for the second half of last season. Mm-hmm. And there were some red flags in the underlying numbers long before that too. For sure. But what about Millwall, George? Because they had one of them where 3 away games, Norwich, Coventry and Sheffield Wednesday, in isolation, all really difficult. And so much hinges on the home game against Oxford, where they're expected to win, and they lose 1-0. Are they a major loser? And what do you make of their appointment of Alex Neil? I think they sit somewhere between the major loser and the sneaky loser. Would be my. I mean, it's kind of similar to the whole major. What was it? One of the winners, where I'm kind of looking a little bit beneath just the bare results. Because as you say, these are difficult games, and Alex Neil himself said after the Sheffield Wednesday draw, he was delighted with the point, despite them conceding fairly late. And when you watch the game back, you can understand why. Wednesday, by far the better team, were pretty cursed in front of goal. Hitting the woodwork on several occasions. The goals that Wednesday conceded, the first of which was one of the weirdest attempts of a clearance I've ever seen from Josh Windass, who decided to try and do like a flying volley on the edge of his area, and then a rare keeping error from James Beadle for the second. And that was a pretty poor performance. Oxford obviously went to Millwall and beat them 1-0. Again, Millwall fans may say they didn't deserve to win the game, didn't deserve to lose the game. It's hard to really argue with that. I think a point probably would have been fair, but they were in no way dominant. They were in no way by far the better side. And despite going behind at home, were unable to really mount the kind of challenge you'd expect them in order to win the game or to force their way back into the game. I think the Alex Neil appointment is probably a good one. I think it will take some time for him to turn the form or to kind of implement his ideas. It's quite a clunky succession from Neil Harris to Alex Neil, I would say, in terms of style of play and philosophies and everything else. So it may take a while. But it's easily forgotten that at Stoke there was a period of time at the back end of 22-23 where Stoke looked really, really good. He obviously took Sunderland up, having come in mid-season too. So I'm sure it will come. And I'm definitely not putting them in as losers because of the Neil appointment, which I think is a pretty good one. But it wasn't long ago that Millwall were the data darlings of the Championship, and we're a team that we were saying, well, everything right now suggests they're going to be a playoff challenger. The manager's since decided to leave. The results have got worse, and the performances have got worse, which is not a particularly strong trio of things to happen. I
think that might have been a dream, the whole Millwall underlying numbers thing. It's really got me questioning everything. I've got a couple of sneaky losers. I mean, one of these teams didn't even lose a single game out of 4, so what the hell, Ali? It's Middlesbrough.
Really sneaky.
It's Middlesbrough. I think this is sneaky because, 6 points from 4 doesn't scream sneaky losers, but I think when you consider the fixtures that they had, in particular a home game against Cardiff, which they drew, they had a chance to cut the gap to Burnley with a home game, and that was a 0-0 draw. They had a home game against Sheffield Wednesday where they were 3-0 up at half-time and drew 3-3. That was off the back of a 3-0 draw at Argyle. And then, a good away performance in a 1-0 win at Hull, 1-0 win at Hull that came in injury time. So I think for me it's a mixture of fairly fixtures that presented an opportunity for this Borough side to show what they're about. Performances that were a bit lower than I expect. We don't always expect wins for Borough because over a long period of time they've underperformed their underlying performance numbers, but we do generally expect a level of domination, certainly when it comes to shot data and possession, etc. I'm not sure we necessarily even saw that in this group of games. I feel like their performances have dipped a little, and it's hard to put your finger on it exactly. And then just the fact, in terms of table geography, they had a chance to cling on to the top 4. And because they only picked up 6 points and 3 of the teams above them got 7 and 8, they have lost some ground there. 9 points it is now between them and Sunderland. So instead of closing the gap and looking above them, they're not safe in the playoff spots at the moment. Only 2 points clear of Blackburn in 7th, and then 4 back at Bristol City, at Watford and Sheffield Wednesday. So I just think they're in a bit of it's not a fragile situation, but they're a team that I'm just uneasy about at the moment, Borough. I've slightly lost my grip on them, put it that way. It sounds like more of a me problem than a Borough problem. And then there's West Brom. Again, this isn't really to do with the results or the performances, which were mixed. 1 win, 2 draws and a defeat. Performances, all right. But they are losers in the literal sense, in that they lost their manager, Carlos Corberán, who moved to Valencia in Spain. And he leaves with the well wishes of everyone. It's a great way to lose your manager when they move to an incredibly well known, recognisable team in a top 5 league, one of the biggest teams in one of the biggest footballing nations, and he's from that region as well. There's really not much you can get upset about, I don't think, as a West Brom fan. But there's obviously a question as to where they go next, or what sort of appointment they go for. Corberán is exceptional out of possession and a really intense tactician. Didn't have a huge personal relationship with the players necessarily, albeit had I think there was a lot of respect there. What sort of manager do you go for to replace that guy when he leaves? That's what I'm looking forward to seeing. And I think you just wanted to touch on the Rovers of Blackburn.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very literal loser pick, where they were winless in their games. I mean, they were very, very tough games, it's important to point out, and they didn't play necessarily badly in many or any of them. Certainly they'll feel like the manner of the draw at Leeds. Not many teams go to Leeds and get anything. The fact that they conceded pretty late on to a penalty they don't think was a penalty, only for Danny Batt to go and make to get the equaliser late on, is definitely a positive. The 2-2 draw with Sunderland, with Harry Leonard scoring in injury time, certainly a positive. And then the performance at home to Burnley was good. So, they've had the one kind of glaring bad result was a 1-0 defeat at home to Hull, but they've had 3 really difficult games in there and picked up 2 points, which is fine. It's more just a case where they went into Christmas bang in there in terms of promotion challenging, and because they haven't been able to pick up the requisite results, have dropped off a little bit. But definitely not alarmed, definitely no massive concerns in terms of the performances themselves, just not a great book of results over 4 games.
So NTT20.com providing the best coverage of the EFL transfer window in the form of 2 bulletins a week on Tuesdays and Fridays, with every single done deal detailed. The details of the player, what position they play, what club they're moving from and to, and then a mini write-up as well. Some player and team context, trying to understand what the idea is behind the signing, why this has come about, whether they will have an impact. That's what January transfers are all about. And so, to, I suppose, adapt the words of Martin Tyler after Sergio Aguero's late winner to win the title for Manchester City, I swear you'll never see anything like this ever again in EFL circles. So read it, drink it in. And indeed, to do that, you'll need to subscribe to NTT20.com. And I promise you, if you like good quality, thoughtful, detailed EFL content, and you like reading, then you won't regret it. So give us a go at NTT20.com for our January transfer coverage. That brings us, George, to press the button, FOTMob Corner, where we're going to have a transfer flavour. Because FOTMob is the scores app that you need for a match day, but it's so much more than that. The database that they have of stats for players, teams, clubs, divisions. Teams and clubs are the same thing, but that's fine. We're spitballing here. We've had a couple of weeks off. It's huge because you can use it to scout potential signings, underlying stats for basically every player in the world. There's also a transfer section of each league where you can get an up-to-date list of done deals. We're going to talk about, for me, the most sought-after January loanee, surely. A main character of the EFL for 18 months now. Current joint top scorer across the 3 leagues with 15. But at the moment, and today I dare say, training with Aston Villa at Bodymore Heath. I'm talking Louie Barry. George is going to tell you guys what makes him so special. And I'm going to talk to the fans of 6 championship teams that I think he would suit down to the ground and finish with the team that I'd like to see him join. So go on.
Yeah, it's interesting timing for this as well, because as of this morning, he's been linked to Derby County, which I think was a pretty big surprise for anyone that's following Championship football. No disrespect for Derby, but I was assuming that Barry would be going to a team knocking on the door of the Premier League. And you look at the success that Aston Villa have had in signing Morgan Rogers from Middlesbrough. My assumption was that they'd be kind of using that similar test, send him to a Middlesbrough, a Leeds. If he can prove that he's of the requisite quality to dominate at that level, then he'll be ready to come into their first team next season. And there's no reason in my mind why he won't be able to be. Maybe he'll go to Derby. My understanding is that it's not by no means a done deal, and therefore we can still speculate as to where he may end up. And looking at his loan this season at Stockport, and I think it's also important to remember this as a guy who was brilliant last season, often playing through the middle, almost as like a second striker for Stockport in a front two. He had a really bad knee injury, a serious knee injury, and the fact that he's been able to come back at a young age and continue his incredible exploits at a higher level is so impressive. 15 goals in his 23 games so far in League One this season for Stockport, starting 22 games, just the 2 assists. Looking at his shot map, it's interesting because his role for Stockport this season definitely changed, and he is now every bit that inside left player. It's becoming almost the position that it's almost the new striker, where quite often now the biggest goal threat in a team will either be a right-footed player playing left wing or a left-footed player being right wing. It's probably one of the biggest quirks of how football has changed in the last 5 or 6 years, I would say. And Barry is absolutely that now, playing off the left-hand side, always encouraged to cut inside onto his right foot. But his shot map is surprisingly left channely. Like, there are still way more shots being taken from the left half of the box and from the left edge of the penalty box. But I was amazed to see that he hasn't taken a single shot this season outside the parameter of the penalty area, which is so rare for players like that. If you go and look at someone like Portia Sainz, or you go and have a look at Morgan Whittaker and you see their shot locations, often it's going to be from wide areas, and yet Barry is consistently making sure that he's getting into more central positions in order to take his shots, which is probably why he's got such a good success rate in doing so. He's a really good finisher. You look at his shot placement as well. He can score goals in both areas, often in the corner, with a really good accuracy for finding the target too. He's someone who generally is going to, I would say, will outscore their XG, because he's a very good shooter from range and a very good finisher. 15 goals this season from 9.57 XG, and I think 11.5 expected goals on target. So performing well there. I think the creative side of his game will also improve too. We can see that his expected assists this season is 4.11 as per FOTMob, so only 2 goals scored from 4 expected assists, 22 chances created. So a player that has maybe suffered in terms of his creative numbers based on his teammates not being able to finish rather than him not providing the ammo to do so. But a really good ball carrier and someone who can create as well as score, and a very, very good dribbler and someone who can consistently get and drive your team into the box, as can be seen by 114 touches in the opposition box already this season. That is what you're getting in from Barry. And as I've said before in the Monday pod, I don't really understand why. Obviously, you've got a higher level of defender and fullback to get by. But this is a transferable skill, and I think if Louie Barry is given to a side who are going to be on the ball in advanced areas consistently, such as a Leeds or a Borough, I see no reason why he wouldn't be able to replicate this ability to ghost into the box from that left-hand channel and get shots off. That is what he's all about and what he's been so successful at doing. He's also energetic. He works hard off the ball. He's someone who can lead a press really well and win the ball high in high areas, and will consistently kind of put the work in, as well as being someone whose obvious main facet is in possession. And it was interesting to see that he's obviously left Stockport now. His last game was meant to be in the game against Birmingham on New Year's Day, but he had a hamstring injury in training and therefore couldn't take part in that game. But you look at their Stockport shot map at home to Mansfield on Saturday, in a game where, yes, they've got a few players out injured, but there's just a dearth of kind of decent shot locations, especially from that left-hand channel. And you wonder, had Barry been playing it, surely would have looked very, very different indeed. And a final point before I hand over to you is just about his career progression, where it's quite strange. You don't often see players with this kind of loan career. He burst on the scene obviously at a very early age with his Barcelona, his time at Barcelona at La Masia, and then his goal against Liverpool in the FA Cup during COVID, when basically the whole country was watching Aston Villa send out a team of kids against Liverpool, and Barry opened the scoring. You and I were in the green room at Sky that night. I remember very well. And he was sent out on loan to Ipswich, which was probably a level too high. He then went to Swindon and did pretty well. Went back to MK in League One, and again kind of struggled to really consistently make an impact. And it looked like there was nothing at that time to suggest that he was going to be a player to dominate these leagues. And even at Salford after that, he was a useful player, someone who was certainly decent, but there was no signs that he was going to have the impact that he had. And I remember, again, you and I were together when he signed for Stockport, and both of us were like, all right, okay. It doesn't strike us as being one of the signings of the summer, but you can understand why they've done it. But what he's done at Stockport in League 2 and then League 1, I think shows that we have to have more patience with young players. Again, you look at Liam Delap and what he's doing at Ipswich this season, a player that I'd basically written off after his first couple of loans, and having watched a lot of him, just didn't really see him having the ceiling or the ability, or basically the raw ability to do what he's now doing. And it's a lesson, I think, to fans and to us and to everyone else that development goes at different paces. And for Louie Barry, it took 4 or 5 loans for him to get the kind of move that was needed in order for him to really showcase what he's all about. And I see no reason why that upward trajectory should change, so long as they choose the right move for him now.
So I've gone through the whole of the Championship, and frankly, I think every club should be in for Louie Barry. But there are some maybe more than others. You mentioned Leeds, and I'm looking. They've got Solomon, they've got Ramazani, they both joined in the summer. They don't need another right-footed left winger, even if he'd be a nice thing to have. So here are 6 teams that I think are interesting. Blackburn Rovers would be one. They have proven themselves over a number of years to be, an excellent developer of loanees, and they've had Harvey Elliott, for example, among others. They also need a boost, I think, at the moment. They need goals, for sure. They are the lowest scorers in the top half. And off the left at the moment, they've got Kozia Dewberry, who's another loanee, who's had some bright moments, particularly in the last couple of weeks. But he's a left footer, so maybe more suited to playing off the right. But Tyrese Dolan is drifting into those right-sided areas at the moment. And even though Dolan's right-footed, he doesn't seem as comfortable playing on the left wing. They've got Cantwell in the 10. I don't think he wants to play left wing, but I could see him and Barry linking up nicely. Hedges as well, another option there. I mean, Barry would learn a lot of out-of-possession stuff under John Eustace. He would do quite a lot of defending, and that might be a benefit to his development. And of course, he could still be involved in a Championship playoff scrap and be playing in big games at this level, important games, and developing that experience as well. Swansea, they're a team who build through the thirds, and actually 1v1 wide players is so important to deciding whether their attack is dangerous or looks really stale. Eom, the Korean wide player, is decent, but is not amazing, and particularly his goals and assist contribution this season has been poor. I would be pretty worried about a left side of Louie Barry and Josh Tymon defensively, but that's as much down to Tymon as it is to Barry. But certainly, his strengths do not lie out of possession, it's fair to say. Then there's Hull, who are obviously in a relegation scrap. Do you want to send a player to a relegation scrap? Well, maybe. I mean, Ruben Sellers is so well thought of when it comes to young players from his time at Southampton, and now obviously with Reading and Hull. And I think they need this profile of player. You mentioned Mason Burstow, and having been impressed by him, he's playing left wing at the moment, and I don't think it's ideal to have Burstow as your left winger. Obviously, the injury to Miller means they are just light with right-footed left wingers. So I think that could be an interesting one. But I want to see him in the promotion battle. I want to see Barry, the main character in the EFL, or one of them over the last 18 months, involved in a Championship promotion battle in the next few months. And I think another benefit of moving to a likely promotion candidate is there's then the strong chance of a permanent move and Premier League starts and minutes next season if they win promotion, maybe as part of the loan deal. We know that clubs, elite clubs are quite happy to sell this type of player at the moment in order to raise 10, 15, 20 million quid to help them buy the 50, 60, 70 million pound players. I'm looking at Omari Hutchinson at Ipswich as a good example of what I'm talking about here. So I'm looking at Middlesbrough, and whether they need a left winger depends on how good you think Bergzorg is, and I don't think he's particularly good. I'm not a fan personally. Riley McGree obviously plays off the left sometimes. He's not the same type of player. He's not nearly as direct. And I'm trying to imagine Ben Doak and Louie Barry off the wings, and I would love to see that. But Doak obviously having a lot of interest from Premier League clubs like Crystal Palace recently. Sheffield United I'm looking at as well, just because they are lacking depth. Gus Harmer's been playing incredibly on the left wing this season, but what if he gets injured, or what if he's needed in the centre of the park? I don't think they have a player of this profile to play off the left, and I think he'd learn plenty from Chris Wilder and Alan Knill. But I think the answer is Sunderland. Now, this might be dead in the water because Sunderland are not that keen on loaning other teams' players, but I do think this potential to have something in the contract where there's a big buy price if promotion is secured might appeal to them and their recruitment strategy. And look, at the moment you've got Romain Mundle and Tommy Watson both out injured. You've got Al-Shish in from the cold playing left wing currently. He's not a killer, Al-Shish. He's a nice player, he's easy on the eye, but he's not a killer, and I think Barry is. And Barry is basically the closest thing to Jack Clarke, other than maybe Tommy Watson and Romain Mundle, that I can really think of. I think he'd thrive playing for Sunderland. And I think, being involved in a promotion shake-up, experiencing massive games at the Stadium of Light, potentially playoff games with a ton of pressure as well, could be huge for him. And then purely tactically, because I'm a pragmatist, they've got that solid left back, whether it's Adji Elise, whether it's Dennis Serkin, they've got sturdiness at left back. They don't need the left winger to be hugely diligent defensively because they're always going to have that really strong left back behind him, and I think that would suit Barry and allow him to thrive. So Sunderland and Louie Barry for me would be an incredible fit. I have no idea if they're interested whatsoever, but that's what I'd like to see. And it's been fun talking about this exciting young player using the FOTMob app for data and visualizations, the video on our social channels if you want to see those visualizations, and do download the FOTMob app, link in the show notes for that. Into League One now, where we've got some really major winners, George. 2 teams who picked up maximum points. One of them, Barnsley FC. Now, this was a hell of a couple of weeks for them. Not least because last time we spoke about them on the pod, I bemoaned their inability to perform in front of their home fans, to see out games in front of their home fans. So few home wins in 2024, but already 2 in 2025. One against Wrexham, one a 3-0 win against Crawley. Before that, they'd won at Bolton, at Peterborough. It's just an incredible couple of weeks for Darryl Clarke's team. And I watched his interview from after the Crawley game, and he's not allowing any complacency to creep in. He's pointing out they didn't see out the game well enough, and he wasn't happy about their performance defensively. But he's giving plenty of love to Davis Keillor-Dunn, who's scoring brilliant Davis Keillor-Dunn type goals. He's giving love to the wingback O'Keefe, who's setting up a ton of chances, just such a good outlet up and down the right-hand side. And I've just noted that they look a bit more settled at the back. Donovan Pines, the central centre-back, is huge, literally and figuratively for Barnsley. Earl and De Giovigny, either side of him, I think suit those outside centre-back roles quite well. And in midfield, the emergence of John Russell as a key player for the team is massive, because they already looked pretty good in midfield, didn't they, with Connell and with Phillips, and now they've got Russell in there as well. They've got Nwakali, who's breaking into the team too and played well on Saturday. I can't say anything other than what a chunk of 4 games this has been for Barnsley FC. They're now 5th in the table. They're still 9 off the top 2, but they've got a 4-point gap to 7th, and it's just been a sensational couple of weeks. The reason we've started with them and not Leyton Orient, George, just because they had a tougher fixture list, I would say, but that doesn't mean we can't celebrate what Orient are doing.
Yeah, they came into the Christmas period in really good form. They had 4 games that looked pretty winnable, and they won them all. And they are, they're a team that not that long ago were just on the brink of the relegation zone. Now they're up to 8th. It's been an unbelievable few weeks for Richie Weddens and his sides. They are looking just bang at it, really. All 3 games they won at home were 2-0. They conceded just 1.3 expected goals across the 3. They went to a Bristol Rovers side who, under new manager, looked to me to have improved a little bit, as was seen by the win at Cambridge afterwards, and they won that game 3-2 relatively comfortably. Individuals improving. It wasn't long ago that Orient thought they brought in a bit of a dud of Jamie Donnelly, but he's been really impressive over the Christmas period, playing as number 10. Jack Curry at left back continues to impress. I think Orient fans and Oxford fans probably both were fairly convinced that he would be recalled to Oxford as soon as the window reopened, but that doesn't look to be the case. And Richie Weddens said after the game on Saturday that, as far as he knows, Curry will be staying at the club, which is a bit of a surprise, but kind of the more you think about it, I guess, for his development and what he's doing at Orient right now and the environment that he's playing in, as a long-term project, you probably don't want to recall someone to a championship club only for them not to break into the team and sit on the bench for 6 months. So maybe it makes sense for his development. And certainly good news for Orient too. Everything is positive there right now. It's a club massively on the up, and fans looking up at the playoff places. And if they continue the way they are, that it won't be long until they're in them. Looking really strong at the back, scoring goals regularly, players improving consistently. It's been not just a good festive period, but a good 6 weeks or so for Orient.
Well, if they want a playoff place, they might have to wrestle it out of the strong hands of, yes, Barnsley, but also Reading. Major winners of the festive period. Just fantastic points return. Fantastic resilience. 3 wins to start. 4-1 against Northampton. 2-1 against an impressive Mansfield side. 3-1 away at Cambridge United. And then, to get a point away at Charlton on the 4th, a Charlton side who'd had their previous game postponed, so who'd had an extra bit of rest. Reading on the back of back-to-back away games, missing Craig and Elliott and Campbell and Big Kelvin and Dorset and Kamara. That's 6 players who are probably in their most, 12, 13, 14 most used this season. Wheeling out the skeleton of Harley Dean to play centre-back. A skeleton that only gets wheeled out when they really need Harley Dean because they don't have a 16-year-old that they can play. And for them to be grinding like this away at Charlton, getting a 0-0 draw off the back of those 3 wins, for Noel Hunt to step in a scenario where everyone in the world of football is saying, Ruben Selles, what an incredible manager. No one could have done what he has done at Reading FC, and he deserves this move, but you've got to worry. You've got to worry what happens next with Reading. And Noel Hunt's like, yeah, don't worry about it. Hey, I know these young players too. I know how to get the best out of them. I know how to motivate them, and I'll help set them up nicely to win games. It's absolutely incredible. And lastly, what's really important is to parrot what I saw tweeted by the Sell Before We Die fan protest movement. I think it was yesterday, when I was getting so excited to talk about Reading and what they've done on the pitch in this period. And Sell Before We Die tweeted, to get to 41 points already is a brilliant achievement. But the fact we're having to think about getting to 50 or 62 is a symptom of terrible ownership from 2 awful owners. To the football world, don't take your eye off us until we're sold. So yes, the football was amazing, but still no movement, seemingly, when it comes to the sale of Reading FC, and we need it, and we need some communication, we need some movement on this front, and all the while the team are doing special things, honestly special things. So Reading, Orient and Barnsley are major winners of the League One festive period. What about some sneaky ones?
Charlton, first sneaky one, because things were getting pretty ugly, I would say, at Charlton, with Nathan Jones in particular coming in for some criticism, but results have been much better. You mentioned there the 0-0 draw against Reading, which in itself isn't a great result, but that came before that. We saw a 2-1 win at home to Cambridge, and then a 2-1 win at home to Wycombe, the league leaders at the time. So obviously aided by having 3 home games. The away trip to Crawley was postponed, but maybe the key win here is Miles Lieben doing Miles Lieben things, because he's a player that we know his quality and how exciting a player that he is, but due to injuries we haven't seen him doing it enough. But certainly he was doing it, scoring the 2 goals against Wycombe, scoring the goal as well against Cambridge. And if he's going to be fit and firing, that is going to offer them a completely different outlet going forward and up front. And we know that under Nathan Jones they are. Jones has successfully made them into a team that are very, very hard to break down. The 5-0 win at Northampton just before Christmas was indicative that maybe things are starting to turn. And they couldn't really have done too much more. Yes, they'd have liked to have beaten Reading to make it 9 points from 9, but all things told, it was a very fruitful festive period for them. And Mansfield, another one, who are sneaky winners. Looking at, you could probably make a case for them being major winners, to be honest. When you look at the games that they had, this was a run of games that we probably didn't anticipate they'd be picking up loads of points from, but they surprised us for the most part. They went to Stockport team again, probably quite a good time to be playing them, with Barry sent back, Lewis Bate injured amongst others, but they won the game 2-1 and were deserving winners of that. They beat Bolton 2-1 in the game prior to that too. They went to Peterborough and won that, beat them 3-0 on Boxing Day. So only the 2-1 defeat at Reading was the only blot on the copybook, and even then they played relatively well within the game. So yeah, for 9 points from 4 games for them has put them right bang in the mix for the playoffs too. In a run of games where a lot of their fans not long ago were looking at it thinking, we're mid-table, we've got a tough run coming up, things could get quite nasty after this, but the opposite has happened.
Is there any chance that Lee Gregory can be kept on ice between matches and play 60, 70 minutes every game? Because when he and Will Evans are starting together for Mansfield, from those two they are getting a legit goal threat. But if one of them's missing, the drop-off does feel quite significant. But I was chuckling because you said this should be a major winner, really, because my note for Mansfield is should be a major winner, really, when you look at the fixtures. And I just thought to myself, well, if we both think that, what the hell are they doing in the sneaky winner section? It's either, George, idiocy or an agenda.
Probably it's always an agenda, isn't it?
Interesting.
Really, if we're honest.
Think about it. I'm going Northampton Town as some sneaky winners because, look, you mentioned them getting absolutely humped by Charlton. They'd had a really, really bleak couple of weeks, losing 5-0 to Charlton, 3-0 to Rotherham, 4-1 to Reading on Boxing Day. And then things have picked up a little bit, albeit against teams around them. But that's important for them. They have been somehow keeping the relegation at arm's length, despite having a pretty poor season so far. So for them to get 5 points from these games and move up 2 spots has to be seen as a sneaky win for them. They drew with Shrewsbury and with Stevenage, and then crucially they beat Burton 1-0. Hoskins with the winning goal, his 400th game for Northampton. It's that sort of longevity at one club that we just love to see. And now they're 2 points above the relegation. They were 2 points above the relegation zone. They're now 6 above the relegation zone, with 2 more teams between themselves and Crawley, who are just beneath the dotted line. So a positive couple of weeks for Northampton. I'm still not suggesting that they're playing magnificently well. I do quite like the addition of Liam Shaw from Fleetwood, who I've written up for the bulletin that goes out on Tuesday on ntt20.com. And of course it's Kevin Nolan in the dugout now. Difficult shoes to fill for Cobblers in John Brady, and I'm just interested to see how Nolan does, because I'm not taking a huge amount from his spells at Orient and Notts County. They're quite a long time ago now. He was a very young manager at that time, and since then he has spent 4 years working under David Moyes at West Ham. And, you know, my interview with Brian Barry Murphy that went out over Christmas, he referenced David Moyes as a massive influence. And it's amazing how many coaches and managers have David Moyes as a bit of a North Star, a bit of an influence, I think, with coaches the generation or two beneath him. So I would hope that if he's rubbed off on Kevin Nolan, then Northampton will have a manager that can, you know, help them, take them or keep them in this division, and who knows after that. That's what they need to do, and they had a good time over the last couple of games to make that more of a reality. And then I guess down there as well, we should mention Shrewsbury, because, you know, they were 9 points from safety. Now they're 8 points from safety. They're 5-point haul. But in comparison with Burton, Cambridge, Crawley, the other teams in the bottom 4, they clearly are having a better time of things at the moment. They're clearly looking more competitive, tougher to beat, and they're getting closer, step by step, little by little, to Bristol Rovers and to Peterborough. But I would say things are looking quite Ainsworthy, and that's what you want when you've just hired Gareth Ainsworth. And I think they've given themselves more of a chance than I thought they had previously. So
yeah, Burton have to be the one that we're really looking at here. Yes, Gary Bowyer, a new manager is finally in the door. He looks like a pretty good appointment, but they are now bottom of League One. They are 11 points adrift of safety. And you look at their games. You know, the 1-all away draw at Huddersfield is obviously a good point, but 3 times they've thrown away leads over the Christmas period. They were 1-0 up against Huddersfield, drew the game 1-1. They were 1-0 up against Peterborough, 1-1, 2-1 up against Peterborough, drawing that game 2-2. And even though on the face of it right now, a 2-2 home draw against Peterborough may not seem like the worst result, Peterborough are not a good team, and they are another team that are currently destined, I think, for a relegation struggle unless things improve, given the way they're performing right now. And it would have been a huge victory for them to win that game. And then against Northampton, a team we're talking about there, who've just had a managerial change, another team who look likely to be a side that Burton are going to have to catch in order to stay up this season. And they lose the game 1-0 at home. Unforgivable, really. And yes, a point at Huddersfield is an impressive one for Burton, but realistically, when you look at the league table and the performances and 2 winnable home games within those 2 points from the 4 games isn't overall a particularly good haul, and it feels to me basically an impossible job to expect Bowyer to turn this Burton side around and mount a genuine survival challenge.
Not laying a glove on some of those teams, struggling to create an open play and conceding 2 or more in all 4 of those games. We're now looking at this Cambridge team, if you zoom out and look at the season as a whole, who won 3 games in a row to 0 in the space of a week, a Saturday, Saturday situation. That accounts for more than half of their points this season in what was 13% of their games. So outside of what now looks like the aberration, albeit you did call it at the time as a team who were likely to pick up a few results better than they had done previously based on their competitiveness within games. But they haven't nailed down a way of consistently winning matches or even drawing games. And things seem pretty desperate now when it comes to Cambridge. You know, we're talking about Shrews and Burton and Cambridge. We haven't mentioned Crawley here, whose Christmas was also quite difficult. You know, they're all trying to get out of this. They're basically battling with each other and also the teams above the dotted line. And there isn't lows to shoot at above the dotted line. So it is a difficult situation. I have got Peterborough as a sneaky loser. Or are they a major loser? They're a major loser. Their only win, Posh, in this period, in fact, their only win in the last 9 was a 4-3 home win to Crawley, where they almost lose credit in winning because, you know, they were 3-1 up. They let Crawley come back to 3-3. They won thanks to the individual brilliance of Kean Hayes, but as a collective, again, poor. And Peterborough have not kept a clean sheet in the league this season. Not a single one. And Poku's injury has meant that their attack has dropped off only slightly. They're still scoring in pretty much every game. But this inexperienced defence, this open playing style, which so often works in their favour, is currently a massive issue for them. And they're 5 points above the relegation zone, can come out firing. And that can be excellent. And his communication with the fans is pretty spot on, pretty, you know, almost unprecedented across the leagues. But in these situations, I do just wince a little bit because of the sort of character that he is. You know, will he contribute to a sense of focus and, you know, attacking the issue at hand, or will he fight fire with fire and potentially cause more issues? We will see. Lincoln, they had a pretty miserable time of it, George. I think they were in the playoffs on Boxing Day morning, and now they're, 12th?
That's my first line, thank you. They were in the playoffs at the start of the festive period, now they're 12th. They didn't score a goal in their 4 games. It feels like the 1-0 away defeat at Shrewsbury on Boxing Day has really rocked them. They followed that up with a 3-0 defeat at Bolton, a really surprising 1-0 home loss against Rotherham, and then a 0-0 draw against Stevenage. So 1 point from the 4 games. Just a lot of players who it feels like are kind of out of form. You look through their striking options that before the season started looked pretty good in Bailey, Kadamatari, Makama, Draper, Street, but really struggling to find any cutting edge or creativity with the midfield or the ability to finish those chances off. And it was the manner of the defeat against Rotherham that really concerned me. Rotherham aside, who've struggled this season, yet Lincoln struggled to create anything within the game and couldn't complain about losing that one. We know that defensively they're generally pretty sound, and that's been the kind of the platform for their success under Skabala in the last 12 months or so. But if their attacking output dips to the extent it has in the last couple of weeks, and they're going to really struggle to pick up points and maintain their playoff challenge. So things couldn't really have gone any worse, especially losing 1-0 away at Shrewsbury, a game they would really anticipate they would win. Feels like the confidence might be seeping out of the Imps right now.
Give me a sneaky loser in League One.
Stockport. Clearly they've lost Louie Barry, as we mentioned, and the injuries that they've had to deal with have played a massive part in terms of the teams they've been able to select. You know, the performances themselves haven't been, you know, devoid of some promise. Certainly the 1-0 draw against Birmingham in the second half, they were very good. A point away at Rotherham isn't the worst result either, but a 1-0 away defeat against Huddersfield, a team who they're competing, you think, for promotion with in League One, and then kind of rolling over on Saturday and having a tummy tickled by the Stags. Mansfield winning that game 2-1 thanks to Gregory and Evans, as mentioned, and very good value for that win too. It feels like at Stockport maybe there's been just a bit of a run of circumstances that have in terms of injuries and Barry being recalled and the loss of form of certain players, it's a bit of a perfect storm or an imperfect storm really that's seen their output drop pretty markedly. I think they'll bounce back in time. I'm sure if you made a list of League One clubs who I've got faith in their recruitment, Stockport would be right up there, and I think we'll see them do some good business and improve relatively soon. But it was a tough run of games to go through at the worst possible time for Stockport, and to be winless off the back of those 4 games has certainly done their promotion challenge a bit of harm.
Yeah, some tiny losers elsewhere. Blackpool,
tiny losers,
tiny losers. Blackpool
with definitely one of those
with 3 draws and a defeat. You bastard. Dropping down to 15th here in the meantime, but they drew with Wickham and Birmingham, which on paper are excellent results. They've also played 4 more games away from home than they have at home, so I don't think it's panic stations. I would expect Blackpool not to get any lower than 15th in the foreseeable. Huddersfield, well, the 4th place team. They're trying to keep track of the top 3. 5 points in 4 games, not great for that. They were 3 points off 3rd and 5 off 2nd. Now it's 7 points to both 3rd and 2nd. Bolton, 6 points in 2 wins and 2 draws for them. Down 2 spots though. Again, not a disaster on the pitch, not amazing either, but teams around them, as discussed, absolutely flying in Barnsley and Orient and Charlton as well, Mansfield too. And then towards the bottom, Bristol Rovers, they got a new manager, Inigo Calderon. They are responding to a desperate start to the season where their fairly lofty, I think, ambitions have not been matched at all on the pitch with poor performances and results. And they've kind of, it's a brave appointment to go for a guy who was under 18s coach at Brighton. Doesn't have any senior management experience in the English game. Someone incredibly revered at Brighton for his playing career, and then clearly they wouldn't have hired him if he wasn't a talented coach as well. And in general, an approach of just hiring or signing people or players from Brighton is not the worst approach I've ever heard. But I think I'm developing a stance which is basically stop bringing first-time managers into really quite stressful situations mid-season, because I don't think you're really giving them the chance that you might think you are, or even that they might think they're getting. You're basically lowering them into a lion's den, because Calderon can't afford to have a poor start as Rovers manager. He did start poorly. They conceded 3 goals against Stevenage, which is pretty impressive, as Stevenage generally score none or 1 in their games. Then they conceded 3 in defeat to Orient as well. Did get a huge win at Cambridge on Saturday, but they're just above the relegation zone, 5 points clear of it. And no one involved at Bristol Rovers, certainly not the fans or the people at the club, even though they were in League 2 a couple of years ago, no one's thinking about being back in League 2 anytime soon. They want to be an upwardly mobile, ambitious club. That tallies and tracks with an appointment of this sort of manager, or potentially a bright young thing, but I'm not sure it's the right time for it, and I'm a little bit nervous about it. Hopefully Calderon is just excellent, great communicator, has an impact personally with the players, and sets the team up really, really well, much better than Matt Taylor. But I'm a little bit nervous, I must say, about Bristol Rovers. In League 2, major winners, maximum points, Salford and Walsall. What's happening at Salford, George? What's happening here?
I don't really know. It's impressive. I mean, I should say that Carl Robinson has history of this. Having supported a club that he managed for a long time, getting off to a really slow start and then suddenly putting together a ridiculous run of form to elevate you from mid-table mediocrity into the promotion race is something that, it's what he does, basically. I would probably say that there's probably going to be a run of games relatively soon where they don't pick up points for a relatively long run. But right now he has them really well drilled, defensively so solid. 4 wins out of 4 here, all of them to nil. They'd won 3 of their previous 4 games to nil, so 7 wins to nil in their last 8 games is pretty incredible. Fixtures maybe helped a little bit. Morecambe and Harrogate, both games you'd expect them to win, but the 1-0 away win at MK, I think, is the real marker sent to the rest. Obviously MK not at their best at all at the moment, but they're generally a team who are pretty hard to beat at home, and Salford went there and did a job on them. Hakeem Adelican's come in and has looked really dangerous, often playing centrally. We saw him playing mainly wide at the back end of last season in that incredible run, but playing through the middle now for Salford and looking really, really strong. Big goal threat, direct runner, someone who we know when he's on form and firing can be a massive asset at this level. So Salford looking really, really strong defensively, up to 3rd now, and you can't really look past them for being the big winners of December really in the whole EFL.
And how about this? They've also got an 18-year-old keeper called Matty Young, who's on loan from Sunderland. Sort of, in Football Manager, he'd be like tipped as the next Jordan Pickford. And he had to wait to break into the team, to the point where I remember seeing that they had an 18-year-old on loan from Sunderland. In fact, he's only just turned 18 in November. I remember being like, why have you got this kid in on loan for him to be second choice? Well, he's come into the team. He's played, is it 8 games he's played? Yeah, 1 goal conceded for Matty Young. And I wonder, this is not the sort of research that anyone has time to do, but I wonder, George, if any professional goalkeeper has ever started their professional career with 7 clean sheets in their 8 games, with 1 goal conceded in 8 games. It seems pretty unlikely. It's pretty incredible. I'm here to tell you about our Lord and Saviour, Walsall, who are just the best part of the EFL at the moment. And they're not as impressive as Salford because they only won 3 games, but they only had 3 games to play because their game against Cheltenham was postponed. They won them all, obviously. So they were, 6 clear of second and 8 clear of fourth. Before this, they're now 10 points clear of second, 11 points clear of fourth. They've got a game in hand over everyone except for Wimbledon. They've got 2 games in hand over some other teams in the top 7. And they are just beautifully balanced still. They have not been knocked off balance at all. In this spell, they had 2 2-0 home wins. And there's something about a 2-0 home win that really makes me feel good. Endorphins. It's just, I love what it represents, a 2-0 home win. It represents everything that you want your team to be. And then they went to Notts as well. They won 2-1 at Notts from behind. They made it a double over them in just over a month where they've won 7 straight games. It's absolutely insane what Walsall are doing. Yes, Nathan Lowe is still the headline, still scoring in every single game that we're talking about here, including 2 against Newport. So he has scored in 4 straight. It's just absolutely sensational, and I have nothing further to add. It'd be interesting to talk about them when it gets to the mid-season predictions next week. What about Crewe? Because they're in second, George. They got a big win on Sunday, 4-1 at home to Bromley, and they're still at the top of the chasing pack.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't get off to the greatest start with a 2-1 defeat at Cheltenham, but they probably took part in one of the games of the whole festive period where they hosted Carlisle. They were 2-1 down against a team in the relegation zone fairly late on and managed to win it 3-2. I was sad we couldn't talk about this on the pod as per normal because it incorporated one of my favourite bits of play, I think, from any individual I've seen all season. Bogle scores the goal to make it 2-2. The ball is sent into the Crewe box. It's cleared and it looks like Carlisle are going to get a last counter-attack in the 99th minute, only for Max Conway to he tracks back, tackles the advancing Carlisle player, carries the ball, does 2 really brilliant little shimmies to beat defenders before laying off the pre-assist for the ball. The cross comes into Lancaster and he scores. It is like an unbelievable bit of play from Conway, a player who's come in on loan from Bolton. It's a classic case where you've got Crewe fans basically being like, how is this guy not in Bolton's team? How is he not good enough to be playing in League One? And a lot of Bolton fans hoping he gets recalled in January, but I think for his development, it looks like he's having a great time currently at Crewe. And then a 4-1 win over a Bromley side who themselves have looked really strong recently. They capitalised on the likes of Doncaster and Port Vale, going through a sticky patch, as we'll get onto over the course of the festive period. They capitalised on the fact that theirs was the only game to go ahead yesterday, with the weather putting paid to a few fixtures in League Two. And they're currently second in the league. And given that they had a relatively poor start to the season, the run they've been on since then, Lee Bell deserves immense credit. And it's amusing now that you think of a couple of weeks ago and he was being strongly linked to the job at Burton. Well, right now, why on earth would he take that job? Because Burton are going to be, you'd think, relegated to League Two. And right now, if Crewe continue the way they're going, why shouldn't they occupy one of the 3 automatic promotion berths in the summer?
And Jack Lancaster's been incredible for Crewe. He's at 1.01 non-penalty goals and assists per 90 this season. Just incredible output, constant threat, and creates chances as well as taking lots of shots and scoring goals. I've got Bradford in here. They've got 10 points. They're up 4 places. They scored 2 or more in all 4 games. And the big one for me with Bradford is that they now have the second best home record in the division. Now that is very significant for Bradford because the last 3 seasons they've had the 16th best home record, the 19th best home record, the 10th best home record, basically never playing like a top team at home, and that's one of the key things that's been holding them back, and meaning that they're kind of seemingly stuck at this level. And now they have the second best home record, and things have changed, and I like that a lot. But I think there's also an extent to which this major winner is also a sneaky loser. That's because Andy Cook got a knee injury against Barrow. The extent of it hasn't been confirmed, but it did not look good. And Cook basically scores about a third or maybe a bit more of all of Bradford's goals. Not only that, he's such a focal point for them. If you look at the aerial dual stats of strikers, it really isolates how much of their game is hitting Cook and playing off him, and so they're going to have to adapt. They did that well winning against Grimsby with the first game without him. They've got a really strong box midfield with Smallwood at the base, Sarcevic, Pattinson, Poynton, all good attacking central midfield players as well. They need Callum Kavanagh to step up and score some goals as well. It's not terminal losing Cook. We see quite regularly that the onus on one player to score goals can be a bit of an issue sometimes, and there are other good players in order to score goals, but it's obviously a huge blow for them. Sneaky winners, I've got Morecambe here down the bottom. They moved off the bottom when they beat Carlisle. They then went and beat Tranmere as well, clearly the better side in both of those games, and that's huge for them. A real shame for them, I think, that the Newport game was called off, because Newport's form is poor and Morecambe's is much improved. They are still 4 points from safety. Swindon 4 points ahead of them. Harrogate and Tranmere 5 points ahead of them. They have got a game in hand over Harrogate and Swindon. They are also doing notably well in the mini-league between all of these teams, having beaten Harrogate, Swindon and Carlisle away from home, and Tranmere winning at home and drawing away from home. So they need to pick up points against some of the other teams, because they've only got 3 more games left against this little chunk. But we constantly say you don't need to be that good to stay up in League Two. I think that'll be the case this season, and I do believe that there's more of this Morecambe story to be told. I don't see them going down with a whimper here whatsoever. I think they're sneaky winners of this Christmas period. You've got Aki in there as well, who started in, I think it was in 20 seconds, started this part of town.
Yeah, they haven't necessarily pushed themselves miles clear. They were 22nd and 4 points above the drop zone when we were tucking into our turkey. They're now 19th and 5 points clear, but it's more a case, I guess, of putting more teams between them and the relegation zone. They're beaten at Carlisle, but back-to-back wins against Grimsby and Colchester is really impressive. 3-2 win at home to Grimsby coming back from behind, and then just a really comfortable 2-0 win at Col U, which was unexpected given Colchester have been pretty good in recent weeks. But they were able to, they went ahead through a penalty, made it 2-0. Sean Wally still rolling back the years for Aki, and certainly a deserved win. So maybe a bit of recency bias within that, but the manner of those two wins and the teams they're beating, I think Aki continue to show themselves as being better than the worst in League Two, and probably this season that's as much as they really need.
Yeah, I got Notts County in here as well as a sneaky winner. Only up 1 place, but 9 points picked up, just losing to Walsall, which is, there's no shame in that. Wins away at Cheltenham and MK, scoring tons of goals too, and then a comfortable 2-0 win at home to Swindon. And they're just playing well. They do look so much more solid this season, which is, to the credit of Stuart Maynard and the recruitment team for the players that were brought in, who all look much more comfortable defending in this style as those who played last season. And Jody Jones is back from injury, has come off the bench the last 2 games, so he should come in, and you have to think will have a big impact because we know his quality. They've got Jatta, McGoldrick, Crowley, all fit in starting games as well. And it's just a sparkling attacking unit that they have, and I really think that they have, they're starting to put it all together, which is very impressive. Tell me about a major loser.
Oh, it's a bit sad to do that. Chesterfield, I think we have to say, are a major loser of the festive campaign. They were 5th when we went into it. They're now 10th. They had 4 games planned, one was postponed, and they lost the other 3. It doesn't really get much worse than that. Fairly difficult fixtures. Bradford, MK and Fleetwood were the 3. They were all pretty tight. They weren't well beaten any, but they came away with no points in any of them. And I think really frustrating for them that they were meant to be playing Gillingham at home, and that game was postponed, and Gillingham shortly afterwards sacked their manager. And I think probably Paul Cook and Chesterfield would have liked to have played against the team who were about to sack their manager, rather than we'll have to play the game that was rearranged. So, there's a few teams who started the season pretty well and we anticipated would be solid top 7 teams, all of whom have kind of drifted off a little bit and made room for others to kind of step into that breach, and Chesterfield kind of looked like one of those.
Yeah, Gills been dropping, haven't they, since September, really. 3 wins without scoring. Sorry, 3 defeats without scoring in this period. Away at Colchester, away at Wimbledon, and then the 3-0 defeat at home to Bromley. Just a huge nail in the coffin for Mark Bonner, who was sacked. A slightly peculiar timing. They sacked him on Sunday, not long after their game had been postponed against Chesterfield, which kind of begs the question, if they'd won impressively at Chesterfield, would they have still sacked Mark Bonner? Because he was going to take the team for that game, and then it got postponed, and then he was sacked hours later, and the announcement of his replacement, John Coleman, happened immediately. So I just like these sorts of hypotheticals. What if Gills had won 4-0 at Chesterfield? Does John Coleman get a call and he's like, mate, turn that car around. Turn that car around. He's coming...
Also, there's something that kind of rankled me within this as well, and maybe you and I are a bit biased because Mark is something of a friend of ours. But the statement to say that he had been sacked was really polite, really nice, in saying how everyone enjoyed working with him, what a great guy he was, and how sad they were that things hadn't continued, and how reluctant they were to do it. And then 10 minutes later, you appoint his successor. It just seems pretty disingenuous to be like, we're really devastated, we're going to have to make this decision, but we've also actually sorted out his replacement who's going to be stepping in immediately.
No, I don't have a problem with that particularly. Not per se.
Okay.
I mean, what do you,
just optics.
Maybe the day. What do you reckon? Maybe the day after. I just, maybe the day after. Maybe the day after. That would be nice. But also, clubs always get stick for like, you've sacked your manager and you haven't appointed a new one, and it's been 33 hours. So why did you sack him? So I can't.
And do it after 32 hours. Everyone's happy.
They've been really struggling all season for just coherent performances. Sometimes good defensively, but poor going forward. Occasionally, but rarely good going forward, and poor at the back. It just hasn't got the balance right. It just seems like quite a difficult job, Gillingham, in ways that are quite difficult to put your finger on from the outside with. Owners who seem to support financially, whether it's just poor decision making on the footballing side and recruitment side. It's a bit of a weird one. I want to talk about Carlisle. They're going to buy so many players in January, but there's a part of me that doesn't think that they should be rewarded for being able to buy loads of players like Elliot Embleton on 3.5-year contracts if they do stay up. There's also a big part of me that doesn't necessarily think it's going to lead to them staying up, because there's so little about the team in terms of personality, and I don't know how much January transfers can really change things like straight away. This team under Mike Williamson that find it so difficult to score goals, but don't have a hugely strong backbone either. They got 3 points in this period, but they lost to Morecambe and Tranmere, which is just disastrous. They beat Accrington, thank God, otherwise it really would have been horrendous. And they did play well at Crewe. They conspired to concede 2 goals in injury time to go from winning that game to losing it, which I think kind of sums up this lack of personality in the team. So, they're 6 points off safety. They've already signed 3, I think, is it? The fact that all of these guys are coming in and wearing squad numbers in the mid-40s just sums up what a mess it has been at this club for the best part of a year, basically, since last January. And just throwing signings at the situation makes me a bit uneasy, because if you get to, what if they don't win again in January? And what if they feel like they have to change the manager, Mike Williamson, again? What on earth do you do then? Because they're clearly signing players to play Mike Williamson type football, which might not be, just to pluck a name out of the air, John Coleman type football or Pete Wild type football, who are managers that have been appointed elsewhere recently. I'm really worried. You've got Newport down as a major loser.
Yeah, I do. Probably didn't see this coming after a 6-3 win over MK, but it feels like a long time ago with another team with 3 defeats and a postponement. 6 points clear of the drop zone now. And again, probably frustration that they had a home game against Morecambe scheduled for Sunday, which was postponed because of weather. And you'd think a win there would have really improved their chances of making sure they're not sucked into relegation battle. But yeah, for my money, any team that loses 3 out of 3 probably has to be a major loser, I'm afraid.
Yeah, fair. Sneaky losers. What's happening at MK Dons? It kind of felt like Scott Lindsay came in, they start getting the wins, lots of your 3-1s, that sort of thing. It's fun, it's attacking, it's Scott Lindsay, it's MK, and we're going to see them finish in the top 3 or the top 7. I mean, they're playing really poorly. I mean, They played 3 home games in this chunk. They only got 1 point. They lost to Notts and Salford, deservedly so. Not looking good at all. Notts clearly the better side in that game. They won at Chesterfield, as discussed. Chesterfield having their own issues at the moment, and particularly a lot of injuries. The one thing for me that's really concerning is I don't think of MK Dons as a particularly strong away side, albeit there's not a massive discrepancy between their home results and their away results. They've played 14 games at home and 9 away, which means for the rest of the season they're going to play 14 games away and 9 at home. And they're not looking good. They're looking really open, vulnerable again, soft centre, and not nearly as electric in attack as maybe their reputation has. So sneaky losers, MK Dons, but clearly the strength of my dismay at what we're seeing here suggests maybe in my head they might be major losers under the radar. You've gone for a couple of teams in the top 7 as well to finish us off.
Yeah, Doncaster, one of them, dropped down to 7th now, just 4 points over the Christmas period, and another kind of disappointing home defeat against Port Vale last time out. A Port Vale side who I'll get onto in a second, who've been really poor recently. Going into it to have games against Walsall and Port Vale, 2 teams who are kind of big promotion rivals, and to lose both is pretty frustrating for McCann, and he's cut a frustrated figure off the back of the Port Vale game. And their home record is what's massively letting them down this season. Just 6 wins from 13 at home for Donny. That's the same record as Cheltenham, for comparison's sake. And then Port Vale, who continued a really disappointing spell into the festive period. Injuries playing a massive part in this, with loads of players out, but some pretty alarming displays, such as the 3-0 defeat away at Grimsby, and a 0-0 draw against Cheltenham, where there was nothing really much between the two sides. It wasn't the kind of 0-0 home draw where they were the superior team and just failed to get ahead. But yes, a much better win away at Doncaster last time, but still 11 points behind Walsall now, when it wasn't that long ago we saw Port Vale play Walsall when Port Vale were the team top of the table. So it's been a pretty alarming drop for them. Donny and Port Vale, 2 teams who didn't enjoy the best festive period, albeit Port Vale won the spoils when they faced each other.
And a little bit of manager news to finish us off. I've been waiting to see where Pete Wild would end up, having left Barrow in the summer. Fleetwood is the answer, replacing Charlie Adam. They're 17th in the table, 15th if you do it by PPG, because they've had a couple of games cancelled. I'm really interested in this one. I rate Pete Wild. I see him as a kind of the Carlos Corberán of League Two, basically, in terms of out of possession, competitiveness, shape, structure, press. Unbelievably impressive. I'm still yet to be convinced by a Pete Wild team in attack. There's quite a lot of different types of profile they have in this Fleetwood squad. I'm interested to see whether it's a squad that suits him, or whether he might need a bit more legs rather than technical ability. We will find out in the fullness of time. Pete Wild, the new manager of Fleetwood Town. And here endeth our festive recap. It's been an incredible few weeks for us personally, with babies and Christmas, and the EFL has been sensational as well across these 4 rounds of fixtures. Hopefully you feel now that you, if you did take your eye off the ball over Christmas with all the turkey and ham, maybe you're now up to date with the major winners and losers and the sneaky ones as well. And we'll be back again next Monday with our mid-season predictions, predicting who we think will win automatic promotion, make the playoffs, and be relegated from all 3 EFL leagues. We'll laugh, we'll cry, we'll debate. I can't wait. Go well.